My name is Crystal Moreno. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how I cut the man I once loved out of my life without a single word. If you've ever felt that eerie moment when the air between you and the person you love changes, when a glance feels heavier than a scream, you'll understand. That's where my story begins. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of Tuesday that drags its feet exhausted by Monday, but not close enough to Friday to feel hopeful. Liam and I were on the couch, half watching some reality show neither of us cared about. The glow of the TV flickered across his face, but he wasn't really there. His fingers toyed with his phone knuckles tight, and he kept tilting the screen away from me in tiny, careless motions. I noticed. I'd been noticing for weeks. The late nights at work, the way his text shrank from paragraphs to single-word replies, the quick lock of his phone the second I walked in. It was all there, glowing in neon red, but I pretended not to see. Love does that to you. It makes you complicit in your own betrayal. And then he did it. He turned to me with that look that hollows out your stomach before the words even arrive. Crystal, we need to talk. The TV buzzed in the background, laugh tracks echoing in some other world where people were still happy. I muted it. My pulse hammered in my ears. About what my voice was steady. Too steady. He inhaled like he was about to confess to a crime. And maybe he was. I don't feel the spark anymore. There it was. The classic line. Polished, rehearsed. The coward's way of slicing open someone's chest without leaving visible scars. I stared at him, the silence stretching until he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. He rushed to fill it. It's not you. You didn't do anything wrong. We've just grown apart. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. My eyes stayed on his, unblinking. Is there someone else? The reaction was instant. Too instant. His eyes widened, hands raised, voice pitching high. No, God. Crystal, of course not. He looked offended, like my question was an insult instead of the most obvious truth in the world. This isn't about that. I need space to figure myself out. I nodded slowly. Okay. That one word froze him. I could see it in his eyes. He had expected begging, maybe tears, promises to fix whatever he thought was broken. Instead, I gave him nothing. He shifted uncomfortably, as if my calm had stolen his script. I think I'll stay at Jess's place for a few days, he said finally, just to clear my head. Sure. His mouth opened, then shut again. For once he had no words. 20 minutes later, he left with a small overnight bag, the front door clicking shut like a period at the end of a sentence I hadn't written. The apartment felt cavernous without him, but not in the way I expected. No tears came, no urge to run after him, just silence. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen counter, coffee cooling between my hands. The world was painfully ordinary, the hum of the refrigerator, the sunlight cutting across the floor until my phone buzzed. Instagram. I swiped open the app. There he was, Liam, laughing on a rooftop bar, arm draped over Jenna, his coworker. The caption, when the vibes just sparkle. 3 hours ago, meaning while I lay awake staring at our empty ceiling, he was already with her, already planning this. I recognized her face from the photos he once showed me at office parties. I remembered the way she laughed too loud at his jokes, the way he leaned just a little too close to her whenever I was around. My stomach twisted not from surprise, but from confirmation. This wasn't spontaneous, this was rehearsed, calculated. I zoomed in on his shirt. It was the same one he'd worn in their work group photo the day before. He hadn't even changed. He hadn't even cared enough to hide it. And her face, God, her face. She was glowing, no trace of conflict, no guilt, just triumph. I didn't rage, didn't throw my phone across the room, didn't even text him. Instead, I deleted his number, blocked him, and erased every photo of us from my gallery. By the time he came back, whenever he came back, he would find nothing left. No messages, no explanation, no Crystal waiting with open arms, just silence. That night I packed. His favorite hoodie, the one I'd accidentally kept, I folded neatly and placed on the bed, a small petty goodbye. The rest of my things went into boxes, quick, efficient, surgical. I moved like a ghost, erasing my presence from the apartment we once shared. The only trace of me left behind was the indentation on my side of the mattress and the faint scent of my perfume on the pillow. When the last box shut with a dull thud, I sat on the floor and stared at the blank wall. I should have cried, I should have screamed, I should have felt something, but there was only numbness. A cold, calculated numbness that whispered, "Good. Let him think he killed you. He'll never see you rise again." And in that moment, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't fight him for closure. I wouldn't demand explanations or apologies. I would give him nothing. My silence would be my revenge. The first night alone was the hardest. Not because I missed him, I was too numb for that, but because of habit. My hand reached for my phone at midnight, muscle memory aching to type, "Good night, Liam." I stared at the empty screen until the letters blurred, then shut it off. Sleep didn't come, but resolve did. Resolve that this wasn't the end of me, it was only the beginning. Silence has a sound. It isn't empty, not really. It hums, it presses, it gnaws. When I chose silence, I knew it would be louder than any words I could ever scream. The night Liam left, I didn't text him. The next morning, I didn't call to ask if he was safe. By the time he returned 2 days later, probably expecting to find me pacing the living room in tears, all he found was emptiness. My key sat neatly on the counter. Half my clothes were gone. The refrigerator was barren except for a single carton of milk and the hoodie I'd left folded on his bed, his favorite one, the one he used to steal from me when winter hit early. It was my parting shot. Small, sharp, enough for him to understand. The texts started almost immediately. At first they were indignant. "Liam, Crystal, what the hell? Why is half your stuff gone?" Then pleading. "Liam, we need to talk, please." I left them on red. By the end of the week, the tone shifted to confusion, even panic. But I had already decided I would never give him the satisfaction of a reply. Mutual friends became his messengers. "Crystal, he says you ghosted him." Chris texted, "Are you really going to just vanish like that?" Ghosted. That word made me laugh, as if I had evaporated into thin air. No, I hadn't ghosted him. I had buried him, quietly, cleanly. Every message from a friend went unanswered. I knew they'd picked their sides the moment they comforted him instead of holding him accountable. The first unknown number text came on day 5. "Hey." I didn't need to guess. The ellipses he added at the end, the hesitance, it was his fingerprint. I stared at the message until my phone dimmed, then deleted it. The next morning, a voicemail. His voice soft, almost foreign in its vulnerability. "Crystal, I just want to make sure you're okay. Call me back." I deleted it without hesitation. In the silence I carved, I rebuilt myself. I started running 5 miles every morning before dawn. The first week, my lungs burned, and my calves screamed, but I pushed harder. Sweat blurred my vision, wind sliced at my skin, and for the first time in months, I felt something real. At work, I stayed late, volunteering for projects, devouring tasks like a machine. My boss raised an eyebrow one night when he caught me leaving past midnight. "You okay, Crystal? You've been putting in crazy hours." I smiled even though it didn't reach my eyes. "Just motivated." But the truth was simpler. I needed the noise of work to drown the echoes of him. 2 weeks in, I caught my reflection in a store window after another brutal run. I almost didn't recognize her, the woman staring back at me. Thinner, sharper, eyes darker, not from sadness, but from fire. Good, I thought. Let him miss a version of me that no longer exists. But silence is a double-edged blade. There were nights I ached for the familiar weight of him at my back, the careless way he'd hum while brushing his teeth. "The half-asleep love you," he mumbled before drifting off. My body remembered him even when my heart refused to. I would reach for my phone at 6:30 p.m., muscle memory, expecting his "I'm on my way home." But the screen stayed dark. I forced myself to sit with it, to taste the loneliness until it no longer burned. And slowly it worked. The silence that had once been suffocating began to feel like oxygen. No buzzing phone, no arguments, no pretending not to notice the lies. Just me. I poured myself a glass of wine one Friday night and realized with startling clarity I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Not waiting for his knock, not waiting for his texts, not waiting for his excuses. He was waiting for me, and I wasn't coming back. That was the gift of silence. It turned the tables without me lifting a finger. While I was shedding the skin of the woman who had once loved him, he was unraveling alone, unheard, unseen. And that was only the beginning. It took exactly 37 days. 37 days of silence before the first fissure appeared in Liam's perfect new reality. I remember the moment vividly. I was at my desk at work, head buried in spreadsheets when my phone buzzed. Chris, one of the few friends who hadn't fully taken Liam's side, had sent me a screenshot. It was Liam's Instagram story. A blurry selfie eyes, rimmed red, captioned, "When you realize not everyone has good intentions." The image was almost comical. He'd never let me see him like that before, raw, unpolished, pathetic. With me, everything had to be curated. Perfect. Controlled. Now he was spilling desperation into the world like a teenager after his first heartbreak. Chris's text followed the screenshot. Looks like Jenna ditched him after their work trip. Guess he wasn't her only option. I stared at the photo. Smudged mascara under his eyes, hers, not his. Jenna had left him, just like that. I didn't smile, not outwardly, but inside something cold and sharp twisted with satisfaction. Later that night, my phone lit up. Unknown number. Can we please talk? It's important. I recognized the cadence immediately. The half-desperate, half-entitled plea. Liam. Still no apology, just entitlement. I swiped the notification away. A week passed, then another. The messages came in waves like the tide trying to wear me down. The second voicemail arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. His voice trembled, unsteady, punctuated by sharp breaths. Crystal, I know you're ignoring me, but I think I made a huge mistake. Jenna she was using me. I miss you. Please call me back. I saved it. Not because it touched me, but as proof. Evidence that his regret wasn't about me, it was about rejection, about losing control. By week 6, the facade shattered completely. Chris texted me again this time with a screenshot of Jenna's new post, her on a beach, wrapped around another man. The location tag, the same resort Liam had bragged about taking her to next month. The comments section was chaos, half-deleted messages, bitter replies. Wow, classy. Guess Liam wasn't enough. And right on cue, another message buzzed on my phone. Unknown number. Please, Crystal. I know I hurt you, but I need to see you. I stared at it, imagining him sitting in some dimly lit apartment, clutching his phone with trembling fingers, waiting for my silence to break. It never did. But silence didn't mean I wasn't watching. I checked his profile for the first time in months. His once flashy feed had withered. No more rooftop selfies, no more tagged nights out. Just vague quotes about heartbreak, a few blurry photos of takeout, and a hollow smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man who had once told me I was too emotional now flooded his feed with melodrama. The irony nearly choked me. One night, after a long run, I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through his implosion. Did I feel pity? Maybe in fragments, but mostly I felt clarity. Clarity that this was never about love. Not really. It was about Liam needing an audience. A mirror. Someone to reflect back the version of himself he wanted to believe in. When Jenna gave him that, he abandoned me without hesitation. And now that she was gone, he thought I'd slip back into my old role. But he was wrong. I wasn't his mirror anymore. I was the silence that swallowed him whole. And with every new crack in his life, I grew steadier in mine. The weight he once held over me, gone. The power his absence once carried faded. He had become what I always feared being forgettable. And that was the cruelest truth of all. It was late on a Thursday night when the silence broke, not from me, from him. I had just finished showering after a long run, steam curling in the bathroom mirror, when the knocking started. At first soft, then insistent. Thud, thud, thud. I froze. My heart knew before my mind did. I padded barefoot to the front door, careful not to make a sound. Peering through the peephole, there he was. Liam, shivering in that thin jacket he always wore to look effortless. His hair was messy, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. He knocked again, louder this time, his knuckles pale. Crystal, his voice cracked through the wood. I know you're home. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, counting in my head. 10, 15, 30. I wanted to see how long he'd last out there in the cold. Please, just open the door. 5 minutes. The desperation in his tone was almost foreign. This was the same man who had shrugged off our years together with a lazy, I don't feel the spark anymore. The same man who had paraded Jenna across Instagram while I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Now here he was, trembling outside my door, begging. Finally, I turned the lock. The door swung open so fast he stumbled back. Up close he looked smaller. His nails were bitten raw, his hair unkempt, and the jacket I'd once loved on him was frayed at the cuffs. You look good, he said weakly, scanning me as if I'd let him. I said nothing. Silence filled the space between us like a wall. He rushed to fill it. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. About everything. Jenna. She was a mistake. Just a rebound. You were the one who was always there for me, and I... His voice trailed off, throat tightening. I was stupid. I studied him, the smudged eyeliner. From tears, he'd wiped away the quiver in his jaw, the way his hands twitched, like he didn't know what to do with them. He wasn't sorry, not really. He was afraid of being alone. No, I said finally, my voice calm, slicing. You don't regret losing me. You regret that she tossed you aside like last week's leftovers. His breath hitched. That's not... It's exactly what happened. His eyes flared, the mask slipping. For a flash, I saw the man who had walked out on me without a second thought. The man who had let me vanish into silence, assuming I'd be waiting in the wings. I stepped back, my hand firm on the doorknob. And now you're here because you think I'm still the woman who'll clean up your messes. You're really just going to throw away 3 years like this? His voice sharpened anger mixing with desperation. There it was, the real Liam, the one who believed love was something you could shelf and pick back up when convenient. I smiled, not cruel, not kind, just done, already did. And with that, the door clicked shut. Through the peephole, I watched. He stood there in silence for a long moment, shoulders heaving. Then his fist pounded against the wood twice before falling limp. I saw him wipe at his face with shaking hands, then tug at his jacket as if pulling the seams tight could stitch back his dignity. Finally, the elevator dinged down the hall, the sound of doors sliding open. And then he was gone. I leaned against the door, exhaling the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. This wasn't about love anymore. It was about control, ownership. And I wasn't his to own. That night, I slept better than I had in months. 6 months passed. 6 months of silence so complete it became a second skin. I barely thought of him anymore. The nights I once spent replaying old conversations were now filled with runs. Projects, books that had gathered dust while I was too busy tending to his ego. So when Rachel's wedding invitation arrived, I almost declined. Rachel was one of the few friends who never chose sides. She hadn't coddled. Liam hadn't pushed me for details, just sent a quiet text weeks after the breakup. Whatever happened, I'm here. Come to my wedding. Bring a date if it helps. I thought about bringing someone. God knows I could have. But the idea of showing up on another man's arm just to make a statement felt cheap. So I went alone. The venue was stunning soft lights strung across high beams, cascades of white flowers trailing from every corner. Exactly the kind of place Liam used to point out in bridal magazines with a smirk asking, "Would you ever want something like that?" I stepped into the reception hall and saw him almost immediately. He was perched at the bar, lavender tie, too tight posture, too stiff. The Liam I remembered always looked effortlessly put together, but tonight his effort showed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. His jaw clenched every time someone walked past without greeting him. I could have ignored him. I should have. But my gaze lingered for just a second too long. His eyes caught mine. It was like watching someone get electrocuted. His spine straightened, his mouth parted, and for a moment I saw it, the relief, the recognition, the assumption that my presence was for him. I raised my bourbon in a mock toast, then turned away. Of course he didn't stay away. He found me near the dance floor during the bouquet toss. Crystal. His voice was syrupy sweet, the same tone he once used with my mother to earn points at family dinners. I turned slowly. "Liam, you look..." He let his eyes scan me, hesitation thick in his throat. "Really great." "Thanks." The music swelled around us, people laughing and shouting as the bride prepared to throw the bouquet. But in that bubble, it was just us. "Are you seeing anyone?" he blurted. I almost laughed. "Why?" "Just making conversation." He fiddled with his cufflink eyes, darting around like a nervous schoolboy. "I'm dating someone now. A finance guy. He's amazing." The lie hung in the air, brittle and obvious. Rachel had told me weeks ago he was back on dating apps, cycling through casual flings. "Cool," I said, simply sipping my drink. The silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Then he broke it with desperation. "You know, I think about us a lot." I finally looked at him. Really looked. Stress had carved itself into his face. His hair was thinning at the temples. The easy grin I once loved was gone, replaced by something brittle, hungry. "I don't," I said. His smile faltered. "That's a lie. 3 years doesn't just..." "Liam." My voice was flat. 3 years don't vanish, they erode. And you help chip away every piece. Before he could reply, a warm voice cut in. "You're monopolizing my date." A hand brushed my elbow. I turned to see Marco, a coworker from accounting, grinning at Liam with playful defiance. Marco was tall, sharp suit, the kind of man who carried himself like he owned the ground he walked on. Liam blinked. "You're... what?" "Her date," Marco said smoothly, sliding his arm through mine. He glanced at me, his eyes twinkling like we'd rehearsed this. "Problem." Liam's mouth opened, then closed. He looked between us, flustered. "No, Crystal never mentioned." "Funny," Marco interrupted lightly. "She mentions you all the time." He leaned in slightly, voice lowering just enough for Liam to hear, mostly as a cautionary tale. I couldn't help it, I smiled. For the first time in months, I smiled in his presence. Liam's face paled. His lips pressed into a thin line, and he looked away, searching for something to cling to. But the room kept moving, the music kept playing, and the world didn't pause for his humiliation. Marco squeezed my arm gently. "Come on," he said. "Dinner's starting." As we walked away, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd see: Liam standing there, hollowed out, watching me leave, the way I had once watched him. Only this time it was permanent. For the rest of the night, I didn't think of him. Not once. And that was the truest freedom of all. The wedding dinner began with champagne toasts and clinking silverware, but I barely tasted the food. The sweetness of the moment wasn't on my plate. It was sitting across the hall, watching me, with eyes that burned holes through the air. Liam. He kept glancing over his jaw, tight, his hands restless against the tablecloth. Every time Marco leaned close to whisper a joke in my ear, Liam's knuckles whitened on his glass. I didn't need to hear him to know the words spinning in his head. That should be me. But it wasn't, not anymore. Halfway through dinner, Marco leaned in, voice low enough only I could hear. "Is he still staring at you?" I smirked, not bothering to glance over, like a dog locked outside in the rain. Marco chuckled softly. "Good. Let him drown." I hadn't asked Marco to play along, but he slipped into the role so naturally it felt like fate. A coworker who'd seen me claw my way through the wreckage Liam left behind, Marco understood what it meant for me to be seen, not pitied. During dessert, Liam finally cracked. He approached our table with a strained smile, the kind that barely covered the storm beneath. "Crystal," he said tightly, ignoring Marco entirely. "Can we talk?" I set my fork down, tilting my head. "We are talking. Alone." His voice hardened. "Please." Marco raised an eyebrow, his grin sharp. "If you need privacy, maybe you should have thought about that 6 months ago." Liam's nostrils flared. "This doesn't concern you." Marco's hand rested lightly on mine, steady but protective. "Oh, it does. She's my date tonight, which makes it my business." The surrounding tables had started to notice. Whispers rippled through the room. I could feel the weight of curious eyes pressing in, but I didn't flinch. I leaned back, cool and deliberate. "What is it you want to say, Liam? That you regret leaving me? That you didn't mean it? That Jenna was a mistake?" His lips trembled. The truth had already been written across his face, but he couldn't force it out. Not here, not with witnesses. So he said nothing. "Thought so," I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until Marco broke it with a laugh. "See cautionary tale." The words landed like a slap. Liam's shoulders tensed, his cheeks flushed, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, he looked powerless. Truly powerless. He turned on his heel and walked away, retreating toward the bar like a wounded animal. Later, as the band played slow songs and couples swayed under the string lights, Marco and I stood at the edge of the dance floor. "Want to dance?" he asked, offering his hand. I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not tonight." "Fair enough," he smiled softly. "But you should know he's watching you like a man choking on air." I followed Marco's gaze. Across the room, Liam sat slumped on a bar stool, drink in hand, his eyes locked on me, with a mixture of longing and fury. Once that look would have undone me. Now it only confirmed what I already knew: I wasn't his anymore. The night ended without another confrontation, but not without fallout. As Marco and I left the venue, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You brought him here to hurt me. I see what you're doing." I deleted it. 2 minutes later, another buzz. "You'll never find someone who loved you like I did." This time I blocked the number. Love number chains. That's what he had given me. And tonight, for everyone to see, I had broken them. As Marco hailed a cab, I looked back at the glowing hall one last time. Through the window, I caught sight of Liam, alone, slouched, his tie loosened, nursing his drink like it could fill the void I'd left. He had wanted me to be his audience, but now the show was over. The wedding was supposed to be his chance. I know that now. He thought seeing me would ignite some old spark, that I'd fall back into his orbit out of nostalgia or pity. Instead, he unraveled. The first cracks showed the very next night. At 1:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You'll regret this. You'll see. No one will ever love you like I did." I stared at the words glowing against the dark of my bedroom. Once they would have cut deep. Now they read like the tantrum of a man who had lost his grip. I blocked the number. But desperation has a way of finding cracks to slip through. 2 days later, another message from yet another number. "You brought him to humiliate me. You wanted to make me look small." I didn't reply. Didn't even delete it this time. I let the message rot in my inbox, unseen, unacknowledged, because nothing enrages a man like Liam more than being invisible. Weeks passed. My life stretched forward, steady and calm. Work thrived. My morning runs lengthened until 5 miles became 8. I started sketching again, something I hadn't touched in years. And Liam. He became gossip. Rachel mentioned in passing that he'd been showing up late to work, eyes bloodshot, smelling faintly of gin. Chris sent me screenshots of him posting cryptic quotes on Instagram. Sometimes the ones you love the most betray you the worst. The silence is killing me. It wasn't poetic, it was pathetic. The final unraveling came on a night I hadn't expected to see him again. Rachel's cousin hosted an after-wedding get-together at a bar downtown. I went with Marco, mostly for the company. The place was buzzing music, loud neon lights flickering against mirrored walls. And there he was, Liam in the corner booth, glass in hand, leaning too close to a bridesmaid who clearly wanted nothing to do with him. His laugh was too loud, his gestures sloppy, his charm long gone. I watched from across the room as he whispered something in her ear. She pulled away, disgusted her eyes, flicking toward the gold band on his finger. Married. He was flirting with someone else's wife. Classic Liam. For a moment our eyes met. His expression shifted, hope, fury, shame, all colliding in an instant. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I simply turned back to Marco and asked, "Want to get out of here?" Marco grinned. "Thought you'd never ask." And just like that, I walked past Liam without a second glance. The music drowned out whatever words he tried to form. To me, he was already background noise. That night, as Marco and I sat in a quiet diner miles away sipping coffee and laughing about nothing, I felt it. The final thread snapping. He had no power left. Not over my time, not over my peace, not even over my memories. All he was now was a cautionary tale I'd survived. And in surviving him, I had become someone stronger. Someone who didn't mistake silence for weakness. Someone who knew silence could be the sharpest blade of all. Months rolled by, like pages I no longer cared to reread. The silence I had given him was no longer an act of revenge. It was simply my life, now peaceful, unbothered, full of possibilities that had nothing to do with him. One afternoon, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. Handwritten, elegant script, Rachel and David. Inside was a thank you card for attending their wedding. A polite note about how much my presence had meant. But at the very bottom, scrawled in Rachel's looping handwriting, was a P.S. that made me pause. By the way, Liam got fired last week. Showed up hungover 3 days in a row. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the words, not with glee, not with pity, but with a strange kind of detachment. The man who once strutted around with unchecked confidence, who believed women like me were permanent fixtures in his life, had finally been forced to face himself. Not because I fought him, not because I screamed or cursed or demanded apologies, but because I walked away. I slipped the card into my desk drawer right next to 2 things. My promotion letter framed in crisp company stationery. A scrap of paper with Marco's number scribbled in a rush after he insisted we grab dinner for real this time. 2 reminders of endings and of beginnings. That night I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the city lights blur into constellations. My phone buzzed once, just a calendar reminder. Nothing from him. And I realized with sudden clarity he hadn't crossed my mind in weeks. Not as a wound, not as a regret, not even as a lesson. He was simply gone. Funny thing about endings. Sometimes the universe doesn't just close a door. Sometimes it hands you the keys to a better one. And I finally was ready to walk through it.